Disclaimer: this video contains graphic details that may be upsetting. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to True Crime Story Achieve. In today's episode, we uncover one of the most disturbing murders in North America, a case filled with obsession, betrayal, and unimaginable violence. This wasn't just a killing. It was personal. And the evidence revealed something far more terrifying than anyone expected. 40 stab wounds. A throat cut so deeply it nearly severed her voice forever. Left on the side of a North Carolina highway. This was not a robbery, not random. This was personal. But the man convicted was a pastor. And the reason behind it? More disturbing than the crime itself. David Jones was driving on interstate when he noticed something unusual. He pulls over on the roadside. I was so scarred and dramatized, he has to call 911. The caller was shaken. I think there's a dead body here. Police arrive. Young woman, white shirt, torn jeans, multiple stab wounds, so many detectives round the scene. This wasn't just murder. Someone wanted her destroyed. It was a bloody body of a young woman. Her skin was sliced open. She had been stabbed so many times. Officers photographing less than a mile away, they found a white Nissan Sentra, later confirmed to Latrice Curtis. Console broken. The attack likely started in the vehicle. Her name is Latrice Curtis, 21 years old, student at North Carolina Central University. Trooper Isaac Cooper's attention was drawn to something unusual along Interstate 540, a Chrysler Pacifica sitting idle near the crime scene. Its hazard lights blinked steadily in the darkness. The driver's window was cracked open. The door wasn't locked. The keys were still resting in the ignition. But there was no driver. The SUV was positioned on the opposite side of the highway from where Latrice's body had been found, close enough to raise suspicion, far enough to feel deliberate. Another license plate check revealed that the car belonged to 43-year-old Robert Lee Adams Reeves, a former pastor at Cedar of Lebanon Baptist Church in Brooklyn, New York. Records showed he had previously worked as a pastor at Cedar of Lebanon Baptist Church in Brooklyn, New York, before moving to Durham, North Carolina in 2002. Within religious communities, Robert wasn't a stranger. He carried a reputation and often introduced himself with the title of bishop. Those who knew him described a man who was sharp, disciplined, and deeply devoted to his ministry. One acquaintance praised him as an exceptional preacher, teacher, and organizer, someone who excelled at anything he pursued. Yet for Latrice's family, his name meant nothing. Her father, Sherman Jones, was stunned. He had never heard of Robert Reeves. Not once. Newly married be the victim's car. Blood was found inside and the console was broken, suggesting the attack began in the vehicle. Investigators collected and ran the license plate several hundred feet east of the body. Officers found a phone. It had been turned off and exposed to the elements, confirming the victim's identity as 21-year-old Latrice Curtis. Latrice Matrol Jones came into the world on May 28, 1986 in Raleigh, North Carolina. Her hair was always perfectly styled, framing her face in a way that highlighted her natural glow. Over time, basketball became less of a focus as she stepped more confidently into her own spotlight. She was stunning, effortlessly popular, and carried a vibrant energy that drew people toward her. Friends remember her as the kind of person who could light up any room, always smiling, always joking, always finding a way to make others feel seen and entertained. Even with all the attention she received, she never lost sight of what mattered. Much of that discipline came from her father, a dedicated juvenile corrections officer who believed in structure, accountability, and strong values. He made sure she understood the importance of education and responsibility, guiding her to keep her ambitions and priorities firmly in place. She was her father's shadow, loved basketball and fishing. One friend recalled it was at NCCU where she met Darren Lee Curtis, an accounting major and former National Guard soldier. Everyone was shocked. The newlyweds moved into an apartment in Austin Grove, Raleigh, full of hope for their future. By January 2008, Latrice was in her senior year at North Carolina Central University. They began an affair in late January 29, 2007, with 7 Randolph Fellow student charismatic athlete. She told Stephen that she might be pregnant and wanted to take their relationship further. Stephen agreed to discuss it the next time they met. Shortly after that, he received another call from Latrice. Now the motive shifts. Fear, exposure, future ruined. But here's the twist: Stephen had a girlfriend, and someone else was watching. Detective asked Darren, "When was the last time you spoke to your wife?" Darren: "She was driving home. Said she was stopping somewhere." By the following morning, when she still hadn't called or returned, panic began to set in. Realizing something was terribly wrong, Darren picked up the phone and dialed 911. "You didn't go looking for her. I fell asleep, but there was no blood, no signs of a struggle, no forensic evidence tying him to the scene. And without proof, he walked free." "Wait, you never went out to search for your wife?" "No, I fell asleep." Investigators zeroed in on him immediately. After all, numbers don't lie in most cases, it's the spouse. But the crime scene told a different story. No blood, no injuries, no DNA, nothing to hold him. So they had to let him go. "Stephen, you were sleeping with a married woman. It wasn't serious. She said she might be pregnant." Silence. "She said that, yeah. And you didn't panic?" "No." But Stephen and his girlfriend had been receiving threatening calls, their tires slashed. Someone was escalating. Robert Reeves escorted Stephen Randolph into the police station, saying he was willing to submit to questions to you. Robert, who had relocated to Durham, North Carolina in 2002, was well known in church circles, even referring to himself as the bishop. His friends described him as intelligent, hard-working, and deeply committed to his ministry. One acquaintance recalled, "He was an excellent preacher, teacher, and organizer. Whatever he put his mind, he excelled at." However, Latrice's family had never heard of him. Her father, Sherman Jones, was baffled. "I didn't know anything about Robert. Never seen him before in my life. My daughter is 21. This dude is 50s. What in the world is going on? How does she know this guy?" "I don't know." "You weren't in that car?" "No." "You didn't follow her that night?" "No." "You didn't call her friend at 2 a.m.? Long pause. "No." He owned 3 phones. One traced to threatening calls. Burned fabric was found in his trash. And his DNA? Inside the victim's vehicle. The pastor wasn't just involved. The evidence placed him inside her final moments. Phone vibrating on nightstand, wind through trees, headlights streaking past at 2 a.m. Latrice's friend answers her call. She hears wind, cars, no voice. Medical examiner later determines Latrice likely died before that call ended, meaning someone else held that phone. That detail haunted jurors. The truth behind Robert Reeves's actions didn't fully come to light until his trial began on September 2009 at the Wake County Courthouse. Prosecution theory: Robert saw Latrice as an obstacle, an emotional rival. When she left Stephen's house, he followed her. When she pulled over, he attacked. Defense argued Robert had limited use of one arm. Could he physically commit such violence? But the jury focused on DNA, phone tracking, burned evidence. After 2 days, guilty, life without parole. Her father says he doesn't believe in closure because closure implies healing, and some wounds don't heal. Latrice was 21 and left on a highway because someone couldn't control obsession. Fade to black. She was stabbed 40 times. The killer was a pastor. The highway murder that exposed a pastor's obsession, jealousy, secrets, and 40 stab wounds. A deadly love triangle on I-540, the pastor, the affair, and the brutal highway killing dark highway with faint police lights. 40 stab wounds on a dark highway. The pastor no one suspected. Silhouette of man in suit with blurred face. Facial emotion. Serious, concerned, not exaggerated. She was stabbed nearly 40 times and left on the side of Interstate 540. But the man convicted wasn't her husband. Robert Reeves is on trial for slaying of Latrice Matral Curtis, a North Carolina Central student stabbed to death and left on a Raleigh interstate. Reeves is facing charges in the murder of Latrice Curtis, an NC Central student, whose body was found along I-540 in North Raleigh. After facing a judge Monday, Reeves will be held in the Wake County Jail without bond. Wake Sheriff's investigators huddled with the first assistant district attorney. Right behind them, Reeves' family and friends, including fellow clergymen, filled most of the first 2 rows defending their friend. What we're going on and seeing now, this is not the man that I know and most of us that are involved with him. He's a good man, Tehillah Church Ministries Bishop Anthony Slater said. This is a shock to all of us, and we send our prayers out to the families and the victims that something else will come out of this. The Bishop Reeves we know is not the beast or the animal that everyone else is portraying to be. All they learned was that Reeves is not getting out of jail anytime soon, if at all. Based on the circumstances of this situation, I will set no bond at this point in time, Wake District Court Judge Robert Rader said. What they may know but aren't saying is what relationship Reeves may have had with the victim. They have met? Let me just leave it at that, Wake County Sheriff Donnie Harrison said. Harrison says the acquaintance apparently preceded the murder, but would not elaborate beyond that. He did say that the very public sight of a woman lying on the side of I-540, stabbed to death, spurred citizens to call with tips. I don't know how many, but I can tell you there was a lot. Something, Harrison said. According to Harrison, those tips with good information helped in the arrest. So exactly how the murder scene led investigators to Reeves may not be known for a while. But one of Curtis's brothers say in the end, that does not matter. He's taken something from us that's going to be forever, so I think he should be behind bars forever. The death penalty isn't something that would satisfy me, Justin Hammond said. Despite that statement, it appears the state capitol's defender's office will have the job of finding a court-appointed attorney for Reeves who is at least eligible for the death penalty. As Reeves faced a judge, Curtis was buried following a small service at a church in Morehead City. Dozens of people attended the service, and there was a lot of support for her husband. As pallbearers carried the 21-year-old from the City of Refuge Church, her husband Darren was comforted by friends and family. She was the only daughter. They had 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl, and she was the baby, and to lose your baby like that, that's very difficult, mourner, John McNeil said. Just 1 year after they began dating, Latrice and Darren made a decision that would change their lives forever. They got married. They were still young, but they weren't impulsive. They believed in what they were building together. Both were focused, hard-working, and determined to create a stable future. Latrice was working in human resources at Sears inside Triangle Town Center Mall, while Darren held a position at a local firm in Raleigh. They talked about goals, security, and the kind of life they wanted to build. To them, marriage wasn't a fantasy, it was a plan. Although Darren had already finished school, Latrice was still pursuing her education, attending evening classes while working during the day to support herself. She had quietly shared with a close friend that she dreamed of starting a family soon, hoping that after Christmas, she and Darren would try for a baby. But beneath that hope was uncertainty. She wasn't sure Darren felt as ready as she did. Their life together followed a steady rhythm. Latrice typically walked through the door around 8 p.m., books in hand, tired but determined. Darren would arrive not long after, and their night would unfold like any other, until January 29th, 2008. That evening, Latrice left for class as usual, but this time, she never came home. By late morning, around 11 a.m., detectives escorted Darren in for an interview. He explained that after their final conversation the night before, he went to bed and slept through the night, unaware that anything was wrong until he woke up the next morning and realized Latrice wasn't home. Investigators immediately viewed him as a potential suspect. His claim that he had simply fallen asleep and hadn't gone out looking for his wife didn't sit well with many, especially Latrice's family. They struggled to understand how a husband could rest peacefully while his wife was missing. Still, Darren complied fully with the investigation. He allowed officers to collect his fingerprints and provide a DNA sample. Authorities searched both his apartment and his vehicle, combing through every detail, but nothing unusual turned up. Detectives also spoke with neighbors, who described the Curtises as a young couple focused on their future, never showing signs of conflict or tension. With no physical evidence tying Darren to the crime scene, law enforcement had no choice but to release him. On April 27, 2007, they stood before friends and family and exchanged vows. From that day forward, she became Latrice Curtis. But while the ceremony marked a joyful milestone for the couple, not everyone shared their excitement. Latrice's family felt uneasy. Darren had always been polite and quiet, but they realized they barely knew the man she was marrying. Her father, Sherman, felt especially wounded. What troubled him most wasn't Darren's personality. It was what he saw as a lack of respect. Darren had never come to him to ask for his blessing. Later, Sherman would say that what hurt him most was that Darren never spoke to him about his intentions to marry his daughter. Sherman Jones was completely blindsided. "I didn't know anything about Robert," he said. "Never seen him a day in my life. My daughter is 21 years old. This man is in his 50s. What in the world is going on? How does she even know someone like him?" The age gap alone raised red flags. To her father, it made no sense. And to investigators, it demanded answers. Determined to understand Robert's connection to Latrice, detectives brought him in for questioning just hours after her body was discovered. At first, Robert was guarded, careful with his words, slow to offer details. But eventually, he began to talk. He claimed that on the night before the murder, he had been at church. According to him, he had loaned his car to his roommate, Stephen Randolph, a senior at North Carolina Central University, because Stephen's vehicle was out of commission. That single statement shifted the direction of the case. Stephen Randolph. Now, a new name entered the investigation. Authorities moved quickly. They collected Robert's DNA, fingerprints, and photographs. During the process, detectives noticed something troubling: cuts on his hands and legs. When questioned about the injuries, Robert brushed them off. He said he'd gotten them while moving furniture. It was suspicious. But without solid evidence tying him directly to the crime scene, detectives had no choice but to release him. At this point, 3 men were under scrutiny: Darren, the husband; Robert, the older man with a questionable connection; and now Stephen. The case was becoming more tangled by the hour. Who exactly was Stephen Randolph, and how did he fit into Latrice's life? Detectives soon learned that Stephen wasn't just another student at NCCU. He was well known on campus, charismatic, athletic, and popular. A talented basketball player with a reputation as a ladies' man. But beneath that charming exterior was a secret. On February 1st, 2008, Robert Reeves walked Stephen into the police station himself, stating that Stephen was willing to answer questions. Stephen cooperated, providing DNA samples and fingerprints without resistance. Inside the interrogation room, the truth began to unravel. Stephen admitted he had been involved with Latrice, an affair, but he minimized it, insisting it wasn't serious. According to him, Latrice told him she was separated from her husband, Darren. Investigators knew that wasn't true. Latrice and Darren were newlyweds. There were no known marital problems, no separation, no indication their marriage was falling apart. When news of the affair reached Latrice's close friends, they were stunned. Why had she kept it hidden? Why would she risk everything so soon after saying "I do"? And more importantly, was this secret relationship the motive behind her brutal murder? The puzzle was tightening, and someone wasn't telling the whole truth. Latrice and Darren Curtis were married less than a year when tragedy struck. Kind of unreal right now, everything going on, Darren said. She was a daughter, sister, niece, most of all, she was my wife, my future. There were a number of men in military uniform at the service. Sergeant Twan Fields served with Darren in Iraq back in 2004. I don't know exactly what happened, but just to lose your wife that fast can really hurt, Fields said. I would hate to lose my wife. I can feel how any man would feel, losing a family member, especially your wife.